Well, welcome everyone. As you are joining us today, we would love for you to drop in the chat where you're joining us from. So Michael, Tiffany, Matt, and I are at different parts of the country ourselves, and we would love to hear from you where you're joining us from. So I am Holly Tate. I'm in Houston, Texas. Michael, where are you today?
I'm in Snoqualmie, Washington, about 30 minutes east of Seattle.
Awesome. So we've got our Pacific Northwest represented. What about you, Tiffany?
I'm the Pacific Southwest. I'm in San Diego, California. So it's nice and gloomy here today. Well, don't be jealous.
Really?
Today. Yes.
And then let me guess, Michael, it's probably sunny in Seattle, huh?
Absolutely beautiful.
You guys switched. And then Matt, where are you joining us from today?
I am in the beautiful land of Plano, Texas.
Yes, so beautiful. That is awesome. And then we have got folks joining us from Colorado Springs, Crystal's from Northern Virginia, Carissa's from Portland. There you go, not too far from you, Michael. We've got Terrell from Arlington, Boise, Idaho. Hey, Justin, we're so glad you're here. Good to see your name here. As you're joining us, we'd love for you to drop in where you're joining us from in the chat. And I'm actually going to ask, just to make sure, Matt or Tiffany, do you see that we're recording on your end? I want to make sure that we're recording this. Yeah. Okay, perfect. That would be perfect. All right. Well, today we are so glad that you have joined us to talk about how do we infuse our culture into our onboarding systems and processes. There are a lot of things that you could be doing at noon on Wednesday, and we're glad that you are with us. You're going to learn a lot today. Make sure you've got your Apple Notes up or your Moleskine, wherever you take notes. If you're a Leader customer, hopefully in Leader, you can take notes. And you're going to learn a lot from Michael, Tiffany, and Matt today. I know I have already. So here's the question that I want you to think about as you're hearing from our experts today. What could you and your team accomplish if every single person on your team had an onboarding experience that left them fully engaged and bought into your mission from day one? I might even encourage you to write that down. What could you accomplish if every employee had an onboarding experience that left them fully engaged and bought into your mission? And then at the end of this webinar, it would be great to come back to the answer to this question and see how you can live this out on your team as you lead your staff. So you've got three experts here today and me as the host. I'm Holly Tate, the Senior Vice President of Growth at Leader. We are a software company that is next generation people management. And you'll hear a little bit more about that today. I'm joined by my colleague, Matt Strzelecki, who's one of our co-founders and our Chief Customer Officer. Matt, you want to say a few words about yourself before we jump in?
Yeah, hey everybody. So for one, I have to say, Holly, I really appreciate the format of this meeting because as you know, and just to fill in the others, I just came from a meeting where my team was asking me difficult questions while I was eating increasingly hot chicken nuggets. So this is much easier. But yeah, just to give you a little bit of background on myself. So I started my career out in SoCal. I saw a few people checking in from OC out there. We planted a church in 2006 in Dennis Rodman's old nightclub in Newport Beach. So you can imagine I've got just a few stories from that season of my life. It was a really fun one. I was an executive pastor there for about 10 years. And I moved into technology from there. So that's when I joined the PushPay team, eventually took on all of what we called customer success there. We helped onboard, about 10,000 churches over those years. And it was shortly after that that my co-founder and I, Matt Tressiter, we've got a bunch of Matts here at Leader. We realized we have an opportunity to create and develop Leader, and Leader was born.
That's awesome. Yes, speaking of culture, at Leader, one of our culture events each week is the midday show. And today, Matt was on the spot, got to answer questions about himself while he was eating hot sauce. So I was very nervous that he was going to show up to this sweating, but he did okay. He did really well. We're very proud of him. Thanks, Matt. All right, Michael. Michael is one of our board members here at Leader. He's also the founder of People Implications and has an amazing career in HR. So Michael, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. It's great to be here. I've been in the HR world for probably 25 years now. It sounds crazy to say that. The one piece of advice I got early in my career from my father was, no matter what you do, don't go into HR. And yet that's where I ended up. And so I've been running HR functions from, mostly large companies, brands you probably recognize, like General Electric and Pepsi, H&R Block, DocuSign, Microsoft. And I just found a calling in this space, right? The ability to go in, look at what are the people, issues related to business strategies, and help create an environment where people can thrive and be successful. And since, about a couple of years ago, I ended up at PushPay with some of the folks that are now at Leader. And I just have a heart for nonprofits. I have a heart for the church. I've done a lot of work locally with my church. When I am in a congregation and they figure out that I'm an HR person, you can imagine how quickly I get put in charge of HR kinds of things. And just have a real passion for this space. So it's a privilege to be here and a privilege to talk to you about something that I think is really important, and it's going to make a big difference.
Thank you, Michael. We're so glad you're here. And Tiffany Henning, I've had the joy of knowing you for several years now, and you are one of my go-to people when it comes to HR. So we're so glad you're here. You founded HR Ministry Solutions several years ago. So tell us a little bit more about you before we jump in.
Oh, absolutely. I did not work anywhere huge that everyone's talking about, no Chick-fil-A CEO type thing. Did work in ministry for about 12 plus years, church plant, old school, everything underneath the sun. Left church ministry, went into corporate HR for many, many years, and then went back to the church world and did church HR. And really our organization was founded out of my story and the story that I ran into time and time again, which is staff people who, worked at a church, worked in ministry, things were wonky. Maybe the culture wasn't that great. They got hurt, they got burnt out. And, I have yet to run into anyone in the ministry world or outside the ministry world that either hasn't experienced that or knows someone who's experienced that. So while we do like staff handbooks and stuff, the core of why we do what we do is the culture piece. So I love that you're doing this. And I know that I'm going to intro you, Holly, because Holly Tate is, I think, one of the best people to talk about culture, because you have been talking about culture and doing webinars and, workshops and all the stuff about coaching and culture. So I absolutely feel like you are an expert in this field as well.
Oh, thanks, Tiffany. You're going to make me blush. I appreciate that. I do love talking about organizational culture. It is one of my favorite topics, and why I'm just so honored to be here with you guys today. Well, drop your questions in the chat. As you're listening today, we are going to leave plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So drop them there, either in the Q&A box or chat. I'm monitoring both of them. So we'd love to hear from you. A little bit about our agenda, what you can expect today. We've got 3 parts. So first, we're going to dive in with Michael on the elements of an effective onboarding process. Then we're going to transition and hear from Tiffany about infusing your cultural values during the onboarding process. And then Matt Strzelecki is going to wrap us up with tools and resources from a streamlined onboarding process, which is something we're very passionate about here at Leader. And then again, we're going to leave plenty of time for Q&A and load you up with a bunch of resources. So make sure you stay to the end with us today. All right, Michael. So when we're thinking about the elements of an effective onboarding process, would love to hear from you. First of all, what even is onboarding and all of the work that goes into making it effective?
Yeah, I think it's really important to think about this in different categories. Let me start, as you're kind of reviewing this screen, let me start with a fundamental concept that I think is mission critical for all of us when we onboard new employees. And by the way, I apologize if there's any noise in the background. This is the world we live in right now with Zoom and people doing yard work outside. But
Sounds good.
Start with the fundamental premise of this concept called the curse of knowledge. We all suffer from this. Now, what's the curse of knowledge? The curse of knowledge is this concept that says we forget what it's like to not know what we know. Therefore, it never occurs to us to pass that on to someone else. And when we think about an onboarding process, it's important to keep that concept in mind. And what I'd like to do is break it down into 3 different categories. Let's start with the what. Now, the what is relatively easy. Now, easy, again, is a relative term. I don't mean it's simple. It can be complex and there's a lot of nuances to it, but this is the basics, right? The ability to make sure that people legally can work for your organization. You know, the paperwork and getting people signed up and collecting all that information. You know, there's a lot that goes into that. And certainly if you find yourself in your organization looking at that list and saying, hey, I don't have one of those, or maybe we don't do that, or I might need someone to take a look at it, reach out to us and we'll help. But that really falls into the back end process. What we want to spend a little more time on today is on the how and the who. So one of the things that's mission critical about onboarding someone to your organization is, again, that concept of it's kind of like joining a lap of the Indy 500 driving a bus, right? Everyone's going fast, everyone knows how it's working, and you're just trying to figure everything out. It's really important up front to think about yourself from that perspective. You know, one of the tips I think that's really important as you're thinking about how to effectively onboard people and really enable them to be successful as quickly as possible is to talk to the last 2 or 3 people that you might have onboarded and then just ask them, you know, what would you have liked to know 6 months ago when you started or 3 months ago when you started? You'll get a lot of valuable information. But here's where I think it's important to talk about the mission and the vision and the values of your organization. You know, I think it's important to have a preset schedule for the first couple of weeks for any individual that's starting. You know, don't just throw them out there and say, welcome, you know, good luck with that. You know, your manager will take care of it. Really set something up ahead of time, because that structure allows people to spend more of their energy listening and absorbing and less time trying to worry about managing their schedule. Think about pre-read materials. And in particular for churches, you know, what are some key sermons that you might want people to have watched? What are some things that, you know, you want people to read ahead of time? What are things that maybe everyone in the organization already knows because it happened 6 months ago or a year ago, but you've never written anything down about it? Think through those opportunities. The other thing that's really critically important is participation. You know, how do you get somebody involved in something? Now, it could be as simple as you have someone who's just started maybe, you know, in, I don't know, doing accounting, or somebody in the back office, but, you know, maybe the first Sunday you have them participate as a greeter or something. Anything you can do to allow people to participate. One of the things that I learned at a company called DocuSign, which I'm sure you're familiar with, we grew from about 300 employees to over almost 4,000 in the 3.5 years I was there. Now that's a lot of onboarding that happens, a lot of onboarding. And one of the things that we did was we talked about what would it mean? What's the point and purpose of our organization? It's not just to sell software, it's to make sure that we are making the world a better place. So we built this DocuSign, this Impact Foundation, and what we did is every month we took all our new hires and we had them all work at a food bank or do a local nonprofit together as a team. Had a phenomenal impact because that participation simply is critical. You also want to think about, how do you have someone, a mentor or someone that you can assign for that person to ask questions who is not their manager. Really important that someone who they can just talk to. So those are some things to be thinking about. But again, it's the principle of how do I get somebody up to speed quickly, recognizing you've probably forgotten what it's like to not know what you know. They don't know enough to even know what questions to ask. And that's going to create a lot of opportunity for confusion or certainly you know, time that could be better spent accomplishing your mission. And I also want,
and Michael, real quick,
yeah.
I just want to say one thing that you said that I really appreciate is the why, which is it's to get that person up to speed so that they can feel successful as quickly as possible. Sometimes I think we think about onboarding for about us as the organization, which it is, right? But it's about putting ourselves in the shoes of that new employee and making sure that we equip and resource them to get them up to speed as quickly as possible. I really like how you said that.
And that's exactly right. Because if you think about what you hired this individual to do, you know, he or she has a set of responsibilities or you wouldn't have brought them on. The goal is to help get them set up for success and give them context as quickly as possible so they can be successful and they can add value. The other thing that's really important, I didn't write it down here and I should have, is please pay very close attention to asking anyone you hire new what they think about your current processes. You have about 90 days where that person sees everything with a fresh set of eyes. And then, they'll assimilate like everybody else, and you'll miss those opportunities. So fully take advantage of, whenever I onboard someone new to my team and bring people new into the organization, I usually pull them aside a couple of weeks in and say, okay, I want to hear what you see. What could we be doing differently? Because they have a unique perspective that's important to take advantage of. Now, before I close here and turn it over to Matt, there's something very specifically different about hiring new managers. Now, the number one thing you can do to disrupt a team is to change the manager. And the challenge with that is the manager has a dual responsibility of leading that organization, but at the same time, they're drinking from a fire hose and they're just trying to figure out, where the restroom is and how everything works. So it's really important to make sure that you spend extra time if you're hiring somebody who is a manager of other people. And there's a process that we put in place, and it's something that was developed with some folks I work with, and 25 years ago, we put this in place. It's really simple. It takes an hour, and what it does is it basically takes what ends up being a couple of months of trial and error, right? People are trying to figure each other out. What does this person think? What can I expect from this individual? What are their hot buttons? People are trying to ask themselves two questions when there's a new manager that comes in. Number one, am I going to survive this change? Am I still going to have a job? This person may make changes. Is my job going to be the same? Or quickly, how do I thrive in this new environment? So we've come up with a very, very simple thing, and it's virtually foolproof to do. What it does is it facilitates getting that information out in the open. And here's how it works. If you want to go to the next slide real quick, it's like I said, it's really simple. You need really just two things. You need the manager, whoever reports to them. I don't recommend doing this unless you have about 3 people or so, because you want the anonymity of being able to ask the questions, and you need a facilitator. You bring the manager in the room, they make a couple of comments about how glad they are to be there, et cetera, et cetera. And then what the facilitator does is ask 3 questions, just 3 questions. What do you already know about this person? And the facilitator writes everything down. Second question, and probably the most critical, is what do you want to know? And if you think about what can come up in those, I'll tell you one real quick funny story. I did this with a senior vice president, this woman that we had hired, and she said, look, I know how to do onboarding. I've been doing this for 25 years. I ran her through this process. She got in front of the team. One of the questions was, how do we best communicate with you? What she told the team, 15 people, was, if you want to get a hold of me during the day, text me. Don't send me an email, because I only look at my email at the end of the day. And you could just see the room of people, this is 30 days into her job, going, well, I wish I had that information 30 days ago, right? That would have made a big difference. This stuff it's simple, but we don't think about it. And then the last thing is, what does this leader need to know about the team? If you facilitate that process, you get all the information out of each one of those participants, you bring the leader back in, and they just answer the question. They just walk through and answer them. It provides this incredibly rich environment for people to be more educated and more open about what to expect. It allows people to feel part of the participation process, and it really helps that leader understand what the issues are on the team. And like I said, this is a really simple process, doesn't cost any money, and anyone can do it. So with that, I know there's a lot here to cover, but I think you'll find this process really valuable and kind of a game changer, because again, when you were thinking about onboarding people, we just want to be honest and recognize that there is a lot of assumptions that get made. And we can either let those things work themselves out naturally, or we can facilitate a process that helps us get on the same page quicker and helps build those relationships, build that trust, and build that environment where people can perform.
Yeah, one of the things I love the most about this new leader integration is because of what you pointed out, which we, especially if we're at the executive leader level, we forget the often scariness and anxiety that comes with a new manager or a new leader coming over us. And so for us to really be able to empathize with those, even if they're excited about the new person being hired or becoming their boss, there's still that unknown that everyone is can be cautious of. And so the new leader integration exercise really helps us be able to get it all out in front of us and be able to get to know each other and build those relationships early on in the onboarding process. So we're not stuck 30 days later wondering why they're never responding to my emails, right? So
right.
that's so good.
And a fundamental principle, which I think we all know, but sometimes we forget, is that people rarely interpret neutral information positively. People don't go, I have no idea what's going on, but it must be good. It just doesn't happen that often, right? It's just part of human nature. It's part of how we're wired. And so I think if you can facilitate that good, especially for managers, because expecting the manager to do it while they are also in the process of trying to learn everything, is really not realistic. So, whoever hired that manager, make sure you get this on the calendar, facilitate it, set it up ahead of time. They will be eternally grateful, as will the team.
Yeah, so good. Michael, talk to us about the employee experience. So you have created this graph or chart here talking about the employee experience. Walk us through what this looks like and what this is.
Yeah, so the point of this really is to recognize that the multi-directional aspect of this. When we are inside an organization and we hire someone we are onboarding, we are thinking about distinct steps and processes that we are actually doing. However, the employee doesn't experience it that way. We experience things in the totality of it. So the idea behind this is to recognize that these things need to seamlessly fit together. We don't notice, for example, all of us have background noise right now, wherever we are, that we're not noticing. But all of a sudden, if there's a different noise, we notice that. And employees don't rarely recognize when things seamlessly come together, but they do recognize when they're disjointed. They recognize when there's these cold handoffs between processes. They recognize when I get information on this, but I get nothing on this. And so I think the point of this, and it can be slightly different depending on your organization, but generally speaking, this kind of loop happens in every organization in the world, whether public, private, churches, nonprofits, you name it. The details might differ a little bit, but the concept's the same. And so it's really just for yourself, thinking about what does that person experience from the very first time you interview them until they're actually on board, setting goals and starting to be in the rhythm of doing the work. Does that seamlessly flow together in a way where it's consistent, where it sort of makes sense, each thing just kind of adds on the other, or do they experience it in a very disjointed way? And that's why I think it's an opportunity for anyone who's running a process like this, just to take a step back, and it might be 4 or 5 different people in different departments doing these things, but is it synced together in a way that someone experiences it as a whole?
So good. Thank you, Michael. So we talked about what the effective onboarding process should look like, from our what to our how and our who. We talked about integrating new leaders and how all of that maps into the employee experience. So Tiffany, as we're thinking about the employee experience, let's dive into how we can infuse our cultural values throughout this onboarding process. So tell us more about the difference between compliance and culture and how that plays into our onboarding process.
Totally. It's interesting. I was on mute the whole time, Michael, but I was going, yeah, you can hear me, but I was agreeing with everything you were saying. What happens in a lot of organizations, especially in, nonprofits, churches, everything like that, is that I commonly say the last person to yell, not it, ends up with all of this on their plate. But there's really 2 pieces of HR, and there's really 2 pieces of onboarding. You have the compliance and you have the culture. And a lot of times we're just focused on the compliance. We're focused on the paperwork. We're focused on our checklist, doing everything, getting them going, passing them off, and moving on. But onboarding really is about culture. And the key word I want you to take away from this whole thing is intentionality. That is the key. And here's the problem is that, and I am so guilty of doing this, is that I'm like, I don't have time to do that right now. And so I'm just going to, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. This person's sharp, whatever. They know a couple of people. I'll connect them up. They're good. And we think we don't have time on the front end to do things. But the problem is that we're going to spend about 10 times that amount on the back end, retraining, fixing, dealing with conflicts, dealing with maybe performance issues because expectations wasn't laid out. They didn't understand stuff. So really, it is all about, you know, the intentionality on the front end so that we can get the most out of the employee, and the employee can get the most out of us in their experience and their engagement here.
So good. Now, when we're thinking about culture, culture can be a buzzword. It can feel very nebulous. Like, what is it? How do we define it? So talk to us a bit about how we can define our culture and why that's important before we even start to onboard.
And this is a huge thing. This is a 5-hour webinar workshop all in itself. But with that being said, I think we need to understand we all have a culture at our organization. You have it, whether you've named it or not, you have a culture. And the sad truth is that a lot of times it's not always a good culture. You know, if the culture is you go to the board every time you need something instead of your direct report or whatever, then that is your culture, the good, the bad, the ugly. So the thing is for you to sit down with a group of people or whatever, you need to name what your current culture is. You need to figure out what your current culture is, the good, the bad, the ugly. And then you need to figure out, okay, what do we want our culture to be? And then that's where you figure, okay, this is the gap. We need to kind of work towards this, and you come up with a plan. That especially is true when it comes to the onboarding process, because I did this workshop several years ago where I talked about culture is not just fun, food, and foosball. And absolutely that stuff, it's a lot of fun. But it starts from the moment that you post a job, how you write your job description, how you deal with candidates, you know, your email communication before the person even starts. All of this wraps up into your culture to their entire employee lifestyle cycle, and even after they leave the organization. All of that is your culture, and we need to understand that. And I think some of the people who are on here are probably overwhelmed, like, well, I don't have control of the culture. And I understand that, but I think you can be a proponent for it. You can encourage the leadership to do it. You can help them put some skin on it. Really, a lot of times they just want someone to help them kind of figure out what they need to do and where they need to go and what will help them in the long run. So a lot of times you have to sell the why on it, but absolutely you need to define it. And it's not just defining your church culture. If you're a church, you know, we have church core values, which is, you know, go Sunday and serve and, you know, reach out to the community. That's your church core values, but that's not your staff core values. So you need to figure out your staff core values, which is be kind to one another, always go the extra mile. I mean, there's some great ones out there. You can Google it and see even Google's staff core values and get some ideas of what you can integrate to make your culture just kind of where you want it to be instead of it kind of defining itself.
Absolutely. Such a good reminder. And the work that you put in here on the front end of really defining your culture is going to help in the long term of that entire employee experience. All right, Tiffany, one of my favorite things about you is that you are full of really practical, tactical advice. So I am ready to dive in. Let's start with how we infuse culture and what we need to do before our new employee even starts on day one.
Got it. And, you know, yes, we beg, borrow, and steal, creatively borrow is what I call from other organizations, churches, stuff. Every time we get good ideas, we throw them in our bank of knowledge, because I love churches because they're very much about sharing all of the information. But, you know, a lot of times we're like, okay, here's your start date. And that's about all the information that we give them. And then when they show up on the first day, here's a pile of paperwork you need to fill out in a 50-page handbook. You need to sign off on reading right now in the 43 seconds that I give you to do that. So it's all about building the excitement. It's kind of like a wedding day, I guess. Yeah, the wedding day is great, but you're building up the excitement. You're doing events, you're doing stuff to prepare for it. You're having bridal showers, you're registering, all of that stuff. So it's the same thing, communicating with the new hire, and not only you as not only you as an organization or as the HR person or the last one to yell not it or whatever, but the manager, the department, communicating with this new hire, sending them a note, maybe sending them a handwritten note. I know some of us are going, oh, what's that? But I tell you, it's a novel thing now for people to get a handwritten note that it actually stands out. And one of the other things I say, really embrace video, really, really embrace it. This is, you know, your millennials, your Gen Z, everyone. And I think the last year we've really understood this and stepped into this. Embrace video, because that would be fantastic. Even if it's a pre-recorded message, you can even have, if there's a department, everyone can answer maybe 5 questions about themselves or whatever before the person starts, so that they already start getting familiar with the people in their department. There is nothing more nerve-wracking than showing up first day of work going, I don't know if I should bring lunch. I don't know if they expect, you know, if there's any places to eat nearby. Do they have a refrigerator? Who do I check in with? What should I be prepared? What should I bring? Like all of those questions, and you're nervous. You don't know everything around. Prepare for that. Like, lay everything out, and don't even surprise them. Like, if you have an onboarding plan and a schedule for the first couple of days, give it to them beforehand, and have someone ready to meet them. Tell them what their lunch plans are going to be for that first day. And one of the things I love is one of the ideas, I know I'm jumping ahead of myself, I love decorate their desk. And I know people are like, oh, this is just girly or whatever. But I mean, you can find out their favorite drinks, their favorite candy bars, decorate it creatively based on what you know about them. And that is a huge, exciting way to build up them just on the first day. One of my worst onboarding experiences was at this job where I showed up. It was on a Tuesday. I showed up. My boss was gone for the whole week. The person whose place I was taking basically trained me for an hour and a half and said, okay, well, that's basically the job. I don't know what you're going to do for the other 38 and a half hours. So I'm going to go get my nails done. That's exactly what it was. And I'm sitting there at a computer going, okay, I'm good at making work for myself. So that worked out. But again, that was not very good onboarding experience. And so really communicating with the person beforehand, send them flowers, send them, you know, their a 6-pack of Red Bull, whatever they like before their start date. Send them a care package before they start date. Maybe they can unwrap something every week, you know, before their start date, if it's a long unwrapping. It really shows them that you're trying to get to know them, and that sorry, the comments keep popping up. And so
they're hilarious. Adam, yeah, that was a good one.
And now I know you're leading me into the first day and the first week.
Yes.
So yeah, I definitely like this.
And hey, Tiffany, real quick, I do want to say, so you have this amazing PowerPoint. It's like 30 slides full of awesome ideas that we're going to give everybody at the end. So
yes,
not only are you going to get these slides, but we're also going to equip you guys with Tiffany's slides that have tons of ideas, just like what she's going over. So Tiffany, okay, we've done all the excitement building up to day one. It's day one and it's the first week. What do we, as the HR leader or executive leader on our team, need to do to set our new employee up for success?
Got it. You want to get together beforehand again with their supervisor, and you want to figure out a plan for, at the very minimum, the first week. Don't just stop at the first day, definitely the first week, preferably the first month. It doesn't have to be hour by hour, but have an idea of, again, it's that statement, if you don't have a target, you're going to miss it every time, you know. So you want to set up what your goals are. Those must-have meetings. Have them meet with someone on the senior leadership or the top person if they're able to. Again, I understand this depends on their job, but that is a fantastic thing, because nobody can articulate the DNA and vision of the church more so than your top leadership. Now, they may not understand the nitty-gritty culture because they don't always live in it, but they're really good at just infusing that vision, which I think is just a fantastic thing. I hate working in organizations where the head guy comes around and is like, who's that person? I don't even know who that hire is or that hire is or whatever. It's, you know, it's kind of demeaning, especially if the hire hears that. They're like, okay, the head person doesn't know me. And again, I understand if you're like 500 people, they're not going to know you, but I know a lot of the organizations on here are smaller ones. And so that is an option. One of the other things I heard too is if there is a person in your organization that is just a culture cheerleader, have them hang with that person for a little bit. And they may be a facilities person that works part-time, but maybe they are just super excited about the culture. And, never overlook your facilities people, because they actually really know the ins and outs of everything when it comes to stuff. One of the other things is do an entry interview with them, whether it's you or whether it's a supervisor. And to be honest, probably both would be good. But this is where you really talk to them. Hey, what are you looking for? What do you, talk us through kind of, what this looks like. And really, honestly, what Michael was saying about the leaders is really reverse of what you can do with the employees, which is do the same thing, find out these things from them, and maybe even do it beforehand. And they, you can do like a Zoom interview with them beforehand and send that out to all your staff before, so that everyone gets to know these face. And, that way when they're walking down the hallway and this new person, they know their name, they know their favorite candy bar is a Baby Ruth or whatever. I don't know why people love that, but anyways, and that goes into the getting everyone involved. Get as many people involved in the onboarding process as possible. And again, I know that can seem overwhelming, but I've read a couple of these ideas, which is fantastic, which is like, do a scavenger hunt where the person has to go to different desks or different areas, and everybody has, a secret piece, or maybe they have some swag. Here's a hat, here's a, book, here's a whatever. And they go and, you can make it fun. They have to say a code word or something, banana slugs have no kneecaps or whatever it is. You can,
we're all going to write that one down.
I know. And here's the thing, maybe you're not that type of person, but I guarantee you have someone on staff or a high level volunteer that is like that. Pull them in on it. Some organizations will have a Kindle that's given to the person that's already preloaded with several of the organization's books. This goes back to what Michael was saying. Several of the organization's books that you guys have read that has become part of your language. Really document your language. I worked at an organization and they were always talking about the purple cow. And I'm like, what the heck is this purple cow? Well, then when they told me what book it was from and I read it, I understood, okay, this means something new and exciting, so it helped me understand their language quicker. It's like going to a new country. I learned to speak their language a lot quicker, and the books that they have.
That's
and
great.
all that.
And Tiffany, we've got awesome questions coming in. So let's cover 30, 60, 90 so we can head over to Matt and then leave plenty of time for Q&A. So I want to specifically talk about coaching through one-on-one meetings as we think about the 30, 60, and 90 days of onboarding. Talk to us about what that process should look like in those one-on-one meetings.
Got it. So the 30, 60, 90 days, we traditionally think it's us kind of reviewing the employee. And yes, it is giving them feedback on how they're doing, because again, they're going to make some mistakes, especially in those beginning days. They're learning as they go along. But really the 30, 60, 90 days should be us interviewing them as well. Like, hey, how do you feel? What wins have you had in the last 7 days? Do you feel like you have all the resources that you need in order to complete your job? Do you know what's expected of you? Have you received positive feedback in the last 2 weeks, or positive, comment or whatever, to really ask them those questions to find out how, kind of, again, back to Michael, how their onboarding is going. Are we infusing this stuff into them? Do they have everything they need? Are they frustrated because they showed up for the first day of work and had no idea where to park and spent 30 minutes finding the front office? Those kind of things. And it also, people sometimes are afraid to say things, unless you specifically ask them. So this is the opportunity to really ask them those things. Hey, how's it going? What's going on? Tell me about it. Have specific plans for 30, 60, 90 days. Realize 30 days, they're just kind of learning it. 60, they're kind of doing it with you. And 90 days, they're kind of doing it and you're watching and helping recorrect, kind of thing. But again, the onboarding shouldn't stop at 60 days. You should have plans for 6 months. You should have plans for 1 year. And again, it's not every hour of their day, but
Sure.
It's really infusing that culture piece and being intentional. And that's what I say here. The Gallup's 12 is what I just talked about, those questions. It was a survey that was like from all these employees, what do you wish your employer would ask type thing. I think I have that in the slides as well. So it asks a lot of those questions, and I definitely encourage you to incorporate those into your 30, 60, 90 days and really, really, again, just to circle it all back around, be intentional. Even if it takes more time on the front end, you're going to save yourself gobs of time, stress, and heartache on the back end, and possibly money
So
if
good.
it goes south and you have to part ways with this employee.
Absolutely. I really appreciate the part about one-on-one meetings, because at Leader, we believe that the one-on-one between the manager and their direct report is the most powerful leadership development tool. But it's often underutilized, because it's what you said at the very beginning, Tiffany. It's like, oh, I'm too busy, or I've got an open door policy. They can just stop in and ask me questions. But again, we forget that that new employee might not feel comfortable walking into your office asking you a question. So to provide that intentional, to use the word that you said, time between you and that new employee is critical, not only through onboarding, but their entire employee life cycle. Thank you so much, Tiffany. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I'm just going to throw in one other thing, just to put things in perspective. Any personality test you look, or behavior or skills preference test, when you look, 50% of those, whether it's Enneagram, DISC, whatever you're looking for, 50% of those are people who are more passive. So at least half of your people are not going to come to you and ask questions. You need to go to them and ask the questions. So you need to remember that half of your staff and half the people, maybe more depending on your department, are just not wired like that. So they're naturally going to be more passive about it. So I love the one-on-ones. It is being intentional, and it's giving them the opportunity to ask those questions rather than expecting them to come to you.
Absolutely. So good, and such a good reminder. Well, Matt, I'm excited to hear from you, because you are one of the co-founders at Leader, a software company that's all about engaging and growing employees. And a lot of what you spend your day on is specifically this HR component of engaging and growing employees. So first, I would love to have everybody hear from you a little bit about your background and why you even helped co-found Leader, with your background in customer success and as an executive pastor.
Yeah, absolutely. For one, great job, everybody. I love listening to this content. I feel like we all talk nonstop, but I'm just reminded as we're going through this, like, the work never stops. And I'm like sitting here listening, like, this is so important to get right. So love it, love it, love it. Yeah, so like I mentioned, thank you, Holly. I was an executive pastor for 10 years, which, by the way, I see what you did here. Put the pastor last, so I can't steal everybody's time up front by talking. Smart, very smart.
Yes.
So I was an executive pastor for 10 years, and just loved the church, and spent this last season of my life in technology, specifically in customer success, right? And Michael was talking about the employee experience a lot in his time. And I feel like that's a great way to kind of describe one of the things that's really motivating to me about this new opportunity that we have in front of us, like merging these two worlds together to help create this great experience, help churches create and employers create this really great experience for all of their employees. When I left, into technology, like, one of the burdens that I kind of took with me, and I'm not saying like I'm talking about myself. One of the things that I felt like I could do better is I looked back and I was like, man, like, I feel like we can do such a better job creating environments to help set people up to win from the get-go, instead of, to Tiffany's point, instead of kind of like stumbling through, that first season, whether it's 60 days or 6 years, just kind of figuring things out, like, how can we set people up to win, and how can we set people up to make it for the long haul, right? So for me, I think that's kind of the underlying burden, that I carry, is I feel like we can just do so much better when it comes to engaging and growing and resourcing our employees.
That's so good. And something that you and I talk about a lot is, what if we as employers or leaders, what if we treated our team the way that the best businesses treat their customers? We hear a lot about customer success or customer experience, and we've all had that moment where we've had that wow customer experience moment where we just couldn't believe that a company would treat us that way. But I really believe the next wave of HR and people development is going to be about the employee experience and how important it is that we engage and grow and delight and retain. Or if they leave, that they leave a better person than when they came to our organization. And so I know, Matt, that's so much of what you think about all day, every day, and such a critical part of our team here at Leader as we think about the employee experience that Michael went over. So Matt, as we're thinking about this employee experience, then here at Leader, we think about this question of how can we engage and grow employees every step of the way? Where do you usually see churches or organizations fit as they're thinking about their HR systems and processes? What are those buckets that you're seeing them typically sitting in?
Yeah. So, if you think about, we joke, about the world that we live in, like there's such a big disconnect, but the reality is that expectations are changing, right? And it's just not okay anymore that, outside of work, if you think about like the experience, that we're all having on a day-to-day basis, like outside of work, people can literally pull out their phones and like summon their favorite food to their doorstep with just a few clicks, and like, use something like Uber Eats, this phenomenal experience. Like I want something, somebody will bring it to me. But then we get to work, right? And it's like, I'm gonna put a request in for time off. I have to literally like walk down the hall, in a lot of places, fill out a paper PTO request, not really knowing how much time off I have available even. And then I have to wait for like a year or for like a year, maybe a year in some cases, wait for like a week, to get back. And same thing when it comes to onboarding and all that, right? So to your point, I think when we dove into these organizations and started to look, well, hey, how can we help address this? I think one of the things that we found was that organizations were in one of three different places, right? Like they realized that their employee experiences need to get better and they're starting to look around. And so we started to dig a little bit deeper. And what we found is that organizations have either like really manual processes, right? And I know a lot of the people on this webinar, are probably in this place, like you're interested in this because you're probably the one keeping all these manual processes together. And maybe you're using, some, like paper and some technology, but the reason that it's working is because of you, right? Then we found other organizations are, they have something in place, but it hasn't been updated in 20 years. And, I don't need to dig into that. I don't want to trigger anybody here because we've all had those experiences.
Some PTSD of technology that doesn't quite work the way we want it to. Yep.
Exactly. It's the exact opposite, of a great experience, and then, others, when it comes down to it, like just great technology out there, but, a lot of it is not built to help us really engage and grow our people. And one of the things that we kept hearing, so like for us at Leader, our mission is to help create and grow leaders. We've got this goal. We want to see 1 million leaders raised up, right? And one of the things that we kept hearing is like, I want to develop leaders, right? It's something I'm passionate about, but now is not a good time because this holiday is coming up. This project, is ongoing. But when we dug in more and more, really what it came down to is, hey, these systems are all over the place. I don't have a lot of traction here. And like, I can't spend my time where I know I should.
So good. So as you were hearing from customers and doing research on the HR side of things, because Leader helps with, leadership development, but also HR, what were the key components that you set out to make sure were included on the HR side so that you could really help our HR heroes out there, which shout out to all the HR heroes that are on this. We know there's so many of you that really need to be included to help create an awesome experience, not only for the employee, but also for the person who was doing the work of HR in their organization.
Yep. No, it's a really good question. So again, here at Leader, we're all about helping you engage and grow every single employee. So if you think about that employee experience, how can I engage and grow every single one of these people? Like at all of those moments that we saw on Michael's slide, like we've basically built software to help you do that. So if I was to boil all that up to, like a couple points, I'd say like number one, like we help you bring all of your people process into one place, so everything from digital offer letters to the compliance documents, that Tiffany was talking about, and done in a way where people don't have to call their mom to figure out what field to fill out on their W-4.
Right.
Anybody know what I'm talking about?
I think we've all
there?
been there.
Right.
I've been there. Yeah.
Right. To paid time off and open enrollment, when it comes to all that, and the goal here is we want to help leaders spend less time with the paperwork and more time with their people, while at the same time providing this world-class experience that, doesn't make them double take, when they're leaving from their home life to their work life. So that's number one. And then number two, I'd say we've worked really, really hard to take all the data that we have in our people and get it in front of managers and supervisors so that we can help them better care for their people. So,
and that right there, Matt, is one of my favorite parts about what you're doing at Leader, what we're doing at Leader, is the engagement side. So tell us more, about special day reminders. What does that even mean?
100%. Yeah. So if you think about all the people insights that you have in whatever system you're doing right now, right? So many opportunities to help serve and grow and care for our people, but it very rarely makes its way out of that system or, out of that folder. So this is what we're doing at Leader. We help you obviously collect all that data efficiently, so you have up-to-date data. But when you get down to it, I don't know if you guys have had an experience like this, but where you've turned up to work or a place where people know you well, and you've gone all day long without people realizing it's your birthday or a work anniversary or a specific milestone that's, whether it's happy or sad, something that's important to you, that doesn't feel good. We're not going to quit over that, because, hey, we're adults and we know life happens, but it does raise the question, does anybody really care? So if you can imagine getting prompted proactively, for all of your employees as those special days approach, so that you can show, not just say, but show people that you really care and work hard at creating that experience. That's what we're doing here at Leader. We call it special day reminders.
I love it.
But
yep. It all goes back to the engage and grow, not data just sitting in a platform that's never updated, but how do we actually use it to engage our employees at every step from hire to retire? That's what I've been saying lately, from hire to retire, even though I know Michael and Tiffany would say it even starts before they're hired. It's at that job posting. So good. Well, thanks, Matt. And also, you are a licensed insurance broker. So here at Leader, we can also help organizations with their benefits. We're trying to change the game, make that an awesome experience and not a painful experience. So if you want to learn more about that, feel free to drop a note in the chat or reach out to us here at Leader. We'd be glad to have that conversation with you. Well, I want to jump into Q&A because we've got some awesome questions coming up. So there's going to be a few links and resources that I'm going to throw in the chat box as you guys are sending in your questions. We've got a form here at Leader that is super easy, just takes less than 5 minutes to fill out, that'll help us be able to help you with your HR systems and processes. So I'm going to put that link in the chat. It's confidential only to our team, and we can be able to have a conversation about how we can help you optimize and make a streamlined onboarding process for your team. And then Tiffany's got an awesome onboarding masterclass. And so I'm going to throw that link in the chat in a minute. And then, of course, we'd love to have your questions. So with that, I'm going to stop my screen share so you can see our faces a bit better. And Michael, you've been awesome at already going in and answering some of the questions here. But I really liked one that I saw came in that I think you answered, but I want to make sure Tiffany also gets a chance to answer this one, where the leader said, I'm actually going to be on vacation for a new employee's start date. So what can I do before then so that it's not the experience that Tiffany had personally, but is an awesome onboarding experience? So Michael, I'll let you respond and then let's go to Tiffany.
Yeah, I mean, look, life happens, right? People are remarkably forgiving when it comes to just different scenarios in life. It's not an ideal situation to have someone start when you're not there. Now, I've experienced much worse, mind you. I actually showed up to a job one time and they had no idea I was supposed to be there that day. So, I mean, it can't be worse than that. So here's what I would recommend in a scenario like that. Over communicate up front. and reset, by the way, reset expectations that this is what the first week's going to look like. I'm going to be gone, but here's what I want you to accomplish during this period of time. And then put as much preset time as you can. Set up meetings. This is it's actually a great opportunity, believe it or not. I've had this experience myself where someone started when I was on vacation. And what I took advantage of was I gave them a whole bunch of pre-reads. I gave them a whole bunch of stuff to watch. I gave them things like that to do. Partly because, I needed to fill the time, but partly it allowed them to get really comfortable with learning the context of the job. The other thing is I scheduled lunches for them every day. I made sure that somebody was going to meet them as, on Monday, you're going to do this. On Tuesday, you're going to do this. On Wednesday, you're going to do this. And then every time this has happened to me, and I know we all have different ways to think about work-life balance, and you might be somewhere in the middle of nowhere with no cell service or whatever. But for me, I always check in with somebody during that week. It makes a huge difference. If you can always find 30 minutes or 15 minutes to call somebody and just say, hey, I'm on vacation, with the kids, and we're having a great time. Just checking in. How's your first week going? Any questions you have? That means the world to people. And then what I would do is just, hit it when you get back. So, I think it's one of those scenarios where it's not ideal, but guess what? Life isn't ideal. Life never fits into the little boxes that we want it to. Adaptability,
So true.
flexibility. What you want that person to walk away with is, I'm valued. They care about my experience. They want me to be successful. They're going out of their way to make sure I have a good experience, and people will be forgiving, otherwise. Now, if they show up and there's just nothing there, and, well, where's the person I report to? And I think they're on vacation, that's kind of the other end of the spectrum, right? But I think we're all smart enough to not do that.
So good. Tiffany, what would you add to that? And then I've got another question in our last few minutes together I want to ask.
I would say pre-record a bunch of short videos before you go. That way, maybe have one for each day or different things like that. And everything Michael said totally would be the advice that I give. The one thing I'm going to disagree with you, Michael, just from a big picture is, if you are gone on vacation, do not check your email, do not call, turn your brain off. Otherwise, there's no point of you going on vacation, to be honest. That's how burnout happens, especially in ministry, is that we never turn our brains off ever. So that's a big, again, it's a soapbox from me. You can, make your own decisions about that. But I think you could prepare enough ahead and have someone be your stand-in, so that they have someone who's asking those questions, and make sure you prepare that person with the questions that you want them to continuously check in every day with the person. I love the idea about the lunch roulette and everything with that as well. I think that's fantastic.
Awesome. And I've put Tiffany's slides there for onboarding ideas in the chat. Our HR survey at Leader is in the chat. And then also the HR Ministry Solutions Masterclass is in the chat. Tiffany, we have an anonymous person that's asking about compliance. Any recommendations for how we can find out if we are in compliance? You guys do HR audits, right?
Yeah, we do HR audits where we look at everything, and we kind of give you a gap analysis that says this is where you are, this is where you should be, and this is how you get from point A to point B. You can also Google. The problem with Google is sometimes you could get sucked into the abyss of Google and still not know if you're exactly right. So I totally understand that. When it comes to compliance, when it's new hire paperwork, I will say this: the most important thing you want to make sure that you're doing right is the I-9 form. Number one, has to be done within 3 days of the start date. Number two, you need to view the actual IDs. Most people don't do that. With that being said, if you are a remote company, there's other ways you could do it. Someone else could be your authorized representative. They could go to a notary. I think the government right now has created a little bit more kind of buffer time, just because they know everyone's working remotely right now. But really, if you do nothing else, make sure you do the I-9 form correctly. That is really expensive when they come in and audit.
So good. And I'm going to do one more because I want to make sure we honor everybody's time today. Matt, this one is for you. Eliza is asking a question that we talk a lot about here at Leader: the balance of the desire to have a positive staff morale, but the reality that staff is here to get a job done. So how do we balance that tension? What would you say to that, Matt, as we as leaders are trying to balance the tension of executing the mission, but also caring for our people at the same time?
Yeah, well, I mean, for one, I think it's so one of the things that we say here at Leader is we work hard and we have fun. And I don't know, any way to go about that, without constantly assessing, like, are we too far off on one side of the spectrum, and just creating a culture where you can have really candid conversations. And so this is the kind of stuff that, I can't tell you how many times, people that I work with, and like our chairman here at Leader is constantly asking, not just am I getting the work done, but am I looking after myself? Am I enjoying my job? And what can we do about that, right? So that we can make it for the long haul, running fast, but also running long. So I think for me, my answer is candid, regular conversations where you talk about exactly that.
So good. And that's the power of that one-on-one that Tiffany talked about, even in onboarding, but continuing that to have at least weekly or minimum bi-weekly one-on-one meetings with your staff, Eliza, where you're asking them how they're doing, checking in on a regular basis. I think that's the best, healthiest way to manage that tension, to make sure that they're executing their job, but are also cared for along the way. I put my email in the chat, Tiffany's email's in the chat. Michael, you get the gold star for responding to the most questions. We are so grateful for you and being a master chatter there. We are here to serve you. All of us on this call are super passionate about HR, super passionate about people development and culture. If there's anything we can do to help you, we are here to help. And with that, everyone have a great rest of your Wednesday.